I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Appropriation 2013-14 Estimates Bill. Adjourn debate on second reading and the member proposed thereto.
Order. Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, I think we've just had a demonstration of why these guys are over on the opposition benches for so long, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this government, just under 2 weeks ago, delivered its 5th budget, and in fact Bill English delivered his 5th budget, and the verdict is in, Mr Speaker, the verdict is in. The budget 2013 has been received by the public as Bill English's best budget yet.
Order, just one moment, Minister, just one moment. Could I... Order, please. Those who are leaving the chamber, please do so that we can continue the debates. I'd like to hear what the Minister is saying. The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Speaker, like I said, the jury is in, and its determination is a resoundingly positive budget for New Zealand. And there's been a number of polls, actually, in the last few days that have indeed confirmed that the public have made a resounding endorsement of this government's approach to economic management, Mr Speaker. New Zealanders understand that the government has performed well in tight economic times. And the other side, Mr Speaker, is still road testing their slogans as to what they believe they should be saying about the New Zealand economy. And I see that their latest one, which is being road tested at the moment after the failure of all the crises in the manufacturing sector and so on, their latest one is the two-speed economy, apparently. The two-speed economy. There's nothing two-speed about the New Zealand economy. The New Zealand economy is doing better than just about most economies in the Western world, Mr Speaker. The only thing two-speed around here is the opposition, and they've only got 2 speeds. We've got go slow on the Labor side, and we've got absolutely no go on the Green side, Mr Speaker, and that's exactly correct. Mr Speaker, we are living in a time of 2 very fundamental changes in the world. And the global financial crisis continues to cast a very large shadow over much of the Western world, and we see that regularly on our TV screens. We also have another fundamental change, which is a massive transfer of consumer power from west to east, Mr Speaker, and this government is focused on making the most of that for New Zealand. And China, of course, was our largest export destination in the March quarter this year, which makes Mr Peter's latest attempts to grab some publicity even more inexplicable than normal, Mr Speaker. Over that time, New Zealand has also had to deal with, as well as the GFC, as well as what's going on between Europe and Asia, of course, the Christchurch earthquakes, which is now a $40 billion series of events. The government's share of that cost is now $15 billion. So through those challenges, Mr Speaker, the public has seen that we have steered a sensible, moderate path between austerity that we've seen in some countries in the world and profligacy, frankly, that we've seen in other countries of the world. And in this country, Mr Speaker, there's been those on the left that have spent much of the time saying spend more money. Over the last 4.5 years, we have seen so many examples where they've said, no, you shouldn't cut that, you shouldn't change that, you should spend more money. And, of course, now they're telling us that they would have got back to surplus at the same time, Mr Speaker, which is probably one of the best TUI billboards that I have ever heard. On the right, of course, there are those, most of them outside of this House, that say we should have spent less. But in actual fact, Bill English has got it exactly right. We are now one of the few OECD countries that will be in surplus next year. And even our friends in Australia are looking at a $20 billion Australian deficit at the same time. So you now have a situation, Mr Speaker, where New Zealand is currently one of the most successful economies in the OECD. So economic growth, Mr Speaker, we have 3% in the last 12 months, the UK 0.3%, the Eurozone negative 0.9%, Japan 0.4%, and the US 1.6%. And, Mr Speaker, there's good news for New Zealand households, because we have confirmed, Mr Speaker, the lowest cost of living increases in this country over the last 3 quarters since 1999, the last time we had a decent government in this country, Mr Speaker. We also have the lowest mortgage interest rates in this country since March of 1965. 1965. Low cost of living, low mortgage rate increases, and after-tax wages continuing to rise faster than the cost of living, Mr Speaker. And then we come to employment. And one of the members over there, I can't remember his name because I don't think he's stood up since he's had a job, is saying that what about employment? Well, Mr Speaker, job numbers are up. The quarterly employment survey says 54,000 new jobs over the last 2 years. Unemployment is coming down, 6.2% as against an OECD average, Mr Speaker, of 8%. OECD average 8%. We have unemployment benefit numbers down 13,000 from their peak in December 2010. And compared to Australia, yes, we do still have, it was called the GFC, young fellow, since compared to Australia, unemployment 6.2%, slightly higher, but interestingly, employment, we are significantly higher than the Australians. 63.7% of adult New Zealanders are employed in this country. In Australia, it's only 61.7% of Australians. And we have more full-time employment in this country, Mr Speaker. 78% of New Zealanders in work are in full-time employment. In Australia, it's just 70%, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, this government is doing a very good job with the New Zealand economy. We're dealing with the challenges of a high exchange rate because we are seen as doing better than many of the countries in the world, and we're focusing on growing our exports. And exports of goods and services have gone up 4.6% a year on average in the 4 years to March last year. And our comprehensive business growth agenda is delivering the results of increasing exports despite the headwinds of a high dollar and the ongoing international financial crisis. So you see the initiatives in building exports, Mr Speaker. You see our initiatives in building innovation, and we talked about those earlier in question time today. We see the importance of building up the capital markets and investment. And one of the great ironies is the opposition's approach to the mixed ownership model, when one of the most important things in this country is boosting our capital markets to be able to get more companies, more opportunities for investing in growth and jobs, Mr Speaker. And then we come to skills and all the investments we're making there in our university sector, in our polytech sector and in industry training, and the RMA reforms in our natural resources space, and of course the building of infrastructure, Mr Speaker. So there's a massive program going on, and the public of New Zealand know it. And they know it and they endorse it, Mr Speaker, and we see that in the polls that are going on right now around the country. There's now been 3. The average for the government after 4.5 years is now 48-point-something%, Mr Speaker. For the National Party alone, 48-point-something%, and the Labor Party down at 33%. So why are they down there, Mr Speaker? Why are they down there? Because they've hitched their wagon with the Green Party, and we now have the anti-growth coalition, Mr Speaker. The Labor Greens anti-growth coalition. And these guys have an uncanny ability to have precisely the wrong ideas at exactly the wrong time. It's uncanny how badly they come up with ideas. So, for example, the capital gains tax. So how do you encourage business growth in New Zealand? I know, slap a new tax on every productive business in the New Zealand economy. That would be a smart idea, not. And then they talk about how would we do something else to help the economy. Let's increase the cost of the ETS. Let's put up the ETS cost. So they grizzle around about the petrol tax, but they want to put $500 a year on New Zealand households with the ETS. And their next plan, Mr Speaker, is, well, if they haven't wrecked the economy enough by then, what they should do is perhaps nationalise an industry, a big industry in New Zealand. And so they want to nationalise the power industry to teach those terrible Kiwi savers and those dodgy investors that they shouldn't be interested in a Labor Greens government, Mr Speaker. And the good news is they're not. They've worked it out. And they want to borrow more money rather than pay down debt. And then there's the coup de grace, the print money division. The Greens print money division, Mr Speaker. So here you have it, the wrong policies at the wrong time, meanwhile opposing everything that encourages jobs and growth, opposing the RMA just this weekend, opposing the convention centre, opposing oil and gas, opposing international investment, opposing Denniston, opposing aquaculture. We're not quite sure whether they oppose Denniston or not, but we think they do. So on the one hand, Mr Speaker, you have a government that is focused on encouraging new investment, encouraging growth and jobs, internationally focused, lifting real incomes for Kiwi families, and on the other hand, an opposition that's reactionary, inward-looking, intent on scratching every political itch no matter what it means, frankly anti-growth, and at times, with Winston, at times downright xenophobic. So, Mr Speaker, very straightforward choice. 18 months out, we're very happy with the contrast, building a stronger, brighter future for New Zealand families.
There's a point of order.
Mr Speaker, sorry. I do have a point of order, Mr Speaker. I do take offence at a member of this House being described as xenophobic. So that's been ruled out on a number of occasions, and that member did it then.
Yes, it has, and I'll ask the member to withdraw that comment.
Mr Speaker, I do withdraw it.
Right. I'm calling the next speaker, Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, just because Stephen Joyce